The March 14th, 2024 meeting of the Land Use and Servicing Committee of the Calgary Metropolitan Region Board.
This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you very much. Just a reminder that we are recording this conference and live streaming it on YouTube. If for some reason we find the YouTube streaming fails us, we will endeavor to get it back online. But if we're unable to do so, we will rely on the recording as evidence of this meeting having been conducted in the public. So we will hand this over as we get started here to Deputy Reeve Don Waldorf of Foothills County to provide us with a land acknowledgement.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. We acknowledge all those who call this land home, past, present, and future. May we respect one another, find understanding together, and recognize the benefits that this land provides to all living things who share it.
Thank you very much, Deputy Reeve Waldorf. We have a very substantive and packed agenda today. Lots of really interesting and meaty things to talk about. You know, it is often the case at this committee that we're dealing with substantive matters. I don't know if we've ever had an agenda that digs into all of the issues that I think are really substantial and important for us as a region to be addressing: housing, water, drought, and transportation as well. So it's a really substantial big lift here today. So I'll stop talking and get us on with the agenda. You have all received the agenda. I just will note as we get to our first presentation on the Regional Housing Needs Assessment from UBC Heart, they have provided an updated presentation, which they will be giving us today, and that will be distributed to everyone and also posted on the website following the presentation today as well. So that's just a note for everyone. Aside from that, anyone have any changes, edits, amendments, comments, or questions about today's agenda? And if there are none, I will invite a motion to approve the agenda. Deputy Reeve Koken, thank you very much. And Councillor Robinson from Okotoks, any discussion or questions on the agenda? And by exception, anyone wishing to vote opposed to adoption of the agenda? Seeing and hearing none, that carries. I'll ask the same question about the minutes. Anyone have any questions or comments about minutes from our previous meeting on January 18th this year? And if none, I will invite a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting. Deputy Reeve Waldorf again, thank you. And Deputy Reeve Koken, thank you very much. Any discussion on the minutes? And by exception, anyone wishing to vote opposed to adoption of the minutes? Seeing, hearing none, that carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, on to our first presentation of the day, a Regional Housing Needs Assessment. Lisa Tipman will kick us off, and we are joined today by Andrew Rigsby of UBC Heart. Lisa, over to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Good morning, committee members. We have before us today a housing needs assessment for the Calgary Metro region. It is a project that was started in a slightly different way than some of our projects do. Usually we identify a need and then that project comes up, but in this case, the need sort of came up organically through the Infrastructure Canada, Canadian Permanent Transit Fund project. And we don't know that much about what the application requirements might be or what the fund looks like or any of those details. Those details are being handled in a separate project through the CTF tag that was created by the board in December. But we do know that housing will be a very important part of any application that comes around as part of accessing this public transit fund. So with that in mind, we reached out to the University of British Columbia Heart Project, and that project is a very well-known and respected assessment tool that is available online and to a great degree, but we had the great fortune of having Andrew Rigsby, who is the lead author of our study, come and prepare a housing needs assessment for the region at no cost to the region. It's funded through the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Andrew Rigsby, who is the Data Access and Engagement Manager at the HEART Project, to walk us through the results of his study and to answer any questions of the board. So we're really excited to have him here today. And yeah, thank you so much, Andrew, for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the introduction, Lisa. And yeah, thank you everyone for having me here. I have a 10-minute presentation prepared, leaving room for some questions after. So I'll be giving a brief description of myself, the HEART Research Group. Then I'll describe exactly what is core housing need, which is critical to understanding the data behind the report. And then conclude with the report's key findings. Next slide, please. So my name is Andrew Rigsby, HEART's Data Access and Engagement Manager. HEART is one of the largest housing research projects in Canada, based at the University of British Columbia's Law School. And we've received funding from CMHC to support the creation of housing needs assessments for communities across Canada in order to support applications to federal funding initiatives, like the Housing Accelerator Fund and Infrastructure Canada's transit funding. We've also successfully created some free online tools that have been taken up across the country, including a dashboard of housing need for every community, maps of public land in a few select communities, including Calgary and Edmonton, and a guide that showcases how policies from around the world can be used to stem the loss of affordable housing in Canada. Today, I'll be speaking to you about a report my team and I prepared at the request of the CMRB, which looks at housing need across all member municipalities. The report uses public census data to look at the current stock of housing, to develop a profile of existing households across the region, to explore what types of households experience housing need, and also extrapolates the growth in the number of households based on the last 15 years to arrive at a projection of households in 2031. Next slide, please. The basic definition of housing need in Canada is core housing need, which says a given household is in need if they live in a home with too few bedrooms, their home needs major repairs, or they cannot afford their home nor are able to find an affordable home in their community. Next slide. Yet, core housing need does not capture all households. Among them, people and families experiencing homelessness, students, congregate housing, nor does it assess farms and farm workers. So the results I'll be sharing with you later on housing need already do not capture many people who are very much in housing need. Next slide. The report looks at, next slide, please. The report looks at core housing need across all communities, but we can dig into households by certain groups, primarily by the household's income level, the size of the household, by which I mean how many people live in the home, owners or renters, as well as by populations that CMHC has identified to be disproportionately in housing need across the country. Next slide, please. Before I get into some of the results, I want to highlight that one of the strengths of our report is that we leverage a custom census data order to improve upon how households are grouped by income. We chose to rely on census data as the most reliable source of nationwide data currently available. We worked with Statistics Canada to create this unique data set that groups households by their income relative to the median household income in each community, resulting in these 5 categories. This approach helps us better understand housing need among the poorest households, where we know that housing need is greatest, and supports better targeted responses than income quintiles by grouping people with similar needs. Next slide, please. On to the results. Across all 8 CMRB municipalities, we found that there were almost 55,000 households in housing need in 2021. Although each of these 55,000 households is different, there are certain characteristics that are more common among these households in need. To start, 91% of all households in need earn 50% or less of their community's median household income, which depending on the community is about $50,000 to $60,000 per year. Housing need is also greater among renters, who represent 60% of all core housing need, even though they account for about 28% of all total households. A big part of this disparity boils down to income. In the Calgary Census metropolitan area, the median income for owners was $119,000 in 2021, while for renters it was $66,000. We also found that one-person households are disproportionately in housing need. Half of all households in need are individuals, yet they represent only a quarter of all households. Next slide, please. Core housing need also affects some groups more than others. 1 in 5 single mother-led households are in housing need. There are over 15,000 households in need, senior-led households in need, which include almost 1 in 5 households led by someone over the age of 85. The increase in the rate in core housing need from age 65 to 85 on the chart, going from 13 to 19%, is some cause for concern, as the baby boomer cohort will be getting into their 80s over the next 10 years. We also see disproportionate housing need among Indigenous households, and these are urban Indigenous living off reserve, as well as refugee claimant-led households. Next slide. All these results are based on data from 2021, but we also look at data from the 2016 census and the report to compare that against, which is particularly important since the rate of core housing need was lower across the country in 2021 and lower than ever before. We have good reason to believe that COVID-era income supplement plans, income replacement plans like CMRB are to blame, or rather to thank, for this reduction in core housing need, as they supplemented the incomes of the poorest households, which we know are most in need. And this chart just shows the growth from 2019 to 2020 in median incomes by income decile, seeing that among the poorest 10%, their incomes rose over 500%, dwindling as we go up the income range. However, we know that these benefits are now in the past, and therefore these numbers are probably undercounting actual housing need, not to mention the people and families who are not even examined for housing need in the first place. Next slide, please. So I want to finish by sharing a comparison of projected growth across CMRB members. I'll give you a second to orient to the table. And I did have a couple of actions in the slide, but I see that we've kind of converted it to PDF, so we'll not worry about those. But along the top, you can kind of see your community, and then going down, you can see the projected growth rate by the size of households, starting with 1 person, going down to 5+ persons, and at the bottom is the total projected growth rate over a 10-year period for each community. We calculate these growth rates by performing a line of best fit over the last 15-year period between 2006 and 2021, using 3 data points based on our custom data order 2006, the census 2016, as well as 2021. Extrapolating that trend out 10 years gives us these results. Thus, this does not account for projected growth in immigration, nor recent policies to increase the housing supply. We don't pretend to have a crystal ball into the future, and we would not say that we expect these results to necessarily become reality. Rather, they're intended to be a tool for planning, to maintain policies that seek to achieve these results, or to implement policies that steer away from this path towards a different set of future outcomes. Either way, it can help to see how this approach shows different results across communities and household sizes. So looking at the bottom of the table, there are 3 communities where we project 10-year growth rates over 40%, Chestermere, Cochrane, and Airdrie, with Okotoks not far behind at 34% total growth. I'll also draw your attention to how the growth rates within each community differ by household size, So Chestermere, we've highlighted here, projecting growth rate of 79% for one-person-sized households, compared to Cochrane, where 4-person-sized households are projected to see the greatest growth at almost 50%. Although I'm not an expert in transit or planning by any means, I think there are some useful conclusions to draw from these results that may help guide transit and housing planning in the region. Those fast-growing communities will likely benefit from additional transit hubs, and there may be opportunities to add affordable rental housing nearby or on the same piece of land to help bring down development costs to allow for more affordable rents. While at the same time providing better transit connections so families and seniors don't necessarily need to have a car to access education or healthcare. And next slide, please. I'll conclude here by sharing a bit of intel that I heard from Alberta's Office of Statistics and Information, that they plan to release their own household projections sometime this summer that will be based on their previously done population projections. And having looked at their population projections, they expect a large increase over the next few years, largely driven by immigration. So I would anticipate their projections to show even greater growth than the HART's business as usual methodology. So with that, thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions we have time for.
Andrew, thank you very much for that. That is a lot of information, and I think if we've had a look at the agenda package as well. There's a bunch of data, a lot of data that underpins, I think, a lot of what you've talked about and more. So it's a lot for us to chew on. Having said that, I know our committee members deal with substantial amounts of information as part of their day jobs. So it's great stuff. Good data makes good decisions. So thank you for that. It's really useful, very helpful. So I'll open it up to questions from the committee. You can use the chat function to just put an RTS in, or just wave your hand around if you're on camera, or even use the hand up feature. But let me know if you have any questions or comments for Andrew. We'll open it up. Councillor Karoff from Calgary, go ahead.
Yeah, both myself and our team found this really good work and really sort of full of information, and we really appreciate it. As you may or may not know, the City of Calgary recently declared a housing crisis, and I'm just wondering if you want to take a moment to opine on the relationship between your findings here and the veracity of our analysis that we are in a bit of a housing crisis in the City of Calgary, and maybe by extension the region.
Ooh, that's a big question. I mean, I would probably just say that a lot of places in Canada are in what could be considered a housing crisis. I think from what I've seen, definitely larger cities, especially those who receive a lot of immigration, especially with targets set to increase, over the next few years, are really seeing, I guess, a special tightness in the rental sphere. And I think I read that in 2022, Calgary had the highest growth in purpose-built rental units. But still, like, seeing what would you say? Very low rates of I guess, I can't quite think of the word, but very low rates of I guess all the housing supply is basically taken up, and there's definitely some connection between newcomers to Canada. They're usually seeking rental units. And certainly we know that, the price increases in homes have driven a lot of people to enter the rental housing market, which is kind of, even though, the growth in units is going up, it's still such a tight market. Prices are going up. Condo rates are still tight, and also prices are going up. So, I think no matter how you look at it, in many cities, it's going to be like this for a few years. And I'd say also rural areas are facing their own problems, sometimes different. They often have very little rental stock, but still they're seeing home ownership prices rates go up significantly. So yes, good reason to believe that there's a housing crisis in Calgary and across Canada.
Well, thank you. Our mission is to increase supply on both the market side and especially the non-market side. And yeah, I certainly saw a lot to sort of justify that intention on the part of our council in your findings, and really appreciate the work.
Thanks, Councillor Carra and Andrew, for that. So we've got a question here in the chat from Mayor Peter Brown and Airdrie. The regional housing needs assessment was a good start to regional approaches. Can the CMRB consider how to further support housing outcomes for the region, and would they have the capacity to do so? So I don't know if that's a question for Andrew or Lisa or the team, but I'll, Lisa, I see you're off mute, so I'll let you maybe take that.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mayor Brown. Housing is obviously such an important consideration, and I think it's definitely a regional consideration. We are currently working on a board strategy session for September, and at that time we will present. We're going to present. We haven't locked down the format yet, but we are definitely going to be presenting some information about where we're at with capacity, what we're working on, and what the next couple of years will look like, and be asking the board if they wish to prioritize or reprioritize what we're doing and level up some things and maybe down tool on other things. So that's definitely a question we're having in September, and we will have the information available on what maybe the regional role could be in this area, and allow the board the chance to discuss and debate how they'd like our staff time spent. So thank you for the question.
Good. Thanks, Lise. Next up, Deputy Reeve Don Waldorf from Foothills County. Deputy Reeve Waldorf, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through the chair to the floor. Not really a question, but I found it very interesting the number of single-family households throughout the breadth of the charts, and not sure. Again, lots of ages and probably a lot of reasons, but that one was one that jumped out to me. Thank you.
Yeah, it is interesting, Andrew. I'm curious. Do you have a comment or any thoughts on? Is that a sort of a national trend? Is there sort of a what's driving that? That is a really interesting question.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure exactly what's driving it, but it is a national trend. I've seen it. Yeah, we also did a report for Grand Prairie and saw the same thing. One-person-sized households are growing much faster than any other size. I've seen the same thing in Ontario and the Maritimes. So, and I think this is part of kind of a longer-term trend that we've been seeing. Which is why it kind of especially shows up in our projections. Possibly aging has a factor, as people grow older and partners may pass away. More seniors may find themselves living alone, and we know that kind of our demographic progression is trending to kind of a higher overall age. So I think that's a big part of it. But also, a certain degree of our culture is wanting to live alone and kind of have your own space. So I think those are probably the two kind of underlying drivers.
Great, thank you very much. Anyone else have a question? Councillor Robinson from Okotoks, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for the report. I just was struck, frankly, by one figure, which was the projection of single-person homes in High River declining by 33%, which, if I'm reading pages 67 and 68 of your report right, you're projecting that the single-person homes in High River are currently at 45 and projected to go to 30. I'm getting that right?
Yeah, very, very possibly. I don't have the report in front of me necessarily. Yeah, do you think that's inaccurate? I'm not familiar with High River myself.
I mean, I'm sure, I don't know if Mayor Snodgrass is on the line and who we got from High River, but it seems a little bit off. And I'll say the other sort of data point that, within the report that throws me off a bit is that when I look at the tables of actual single family households, on page 32, it's showing there were 310 in 2016 and 305 in 2021. So I'm just like, these reports, I mean, I understand you extrapolate from data and all this sort of stuff, but when the data has some uncertainty, and I can tell you, we've dealt with this a lot in Okotoks, then the grant application, which is underlying sort of a lot of the premise of why we're obtaining these reports, becomes very challenging. And so when we say to, the government, trust us, our numbers are good, but then we have a report that has, one table that in 2021 we have 305 single family or one person households in High River, but somehow they're going to drop to like 90% of that number in 10 years. I just wonder about, number one, did we do some check on like the reality of these numbers? And two, like what impact that's going to have on our ability to rely on it to get the grants that we think we need in order to get the funding for the housing to meet these needs that I think we all agree exist.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. I hadn't picked up on that. So yeah, let me take that away and see if I can see if there's some inconsistency there.
Yeah, that is a good question. I mean, it's I suppose just the way you've run the data, I suppose, is an artifact of the past does not necessarily straight line into the future. So that's certainly a potential. But yeah, that was an interesting potential outlier that I noticed as well. So yeah, good question. Councillor Robinson, anything further?
No, I just like wanted to see if maybe there was some explanation that could be offered or some sort of quirk in the methodology that could be explained so that we, when we can offer assurance to the funding agencies, primarily CMHC, frankly, but whoever that like you can trust our numbers. Is there's like, how can we reassure potentially like some of the veracity of these numbers?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, very good question. I think, yeah, again, I'll definitely look into the numbers. I'm kind of working with large data sets, and so yeah, certainly I'll allow for the possibility of of mistakes or errors to creep in. I think generally at a high level, we've kind of worked closely with CMHC, so they know what our data is, how it underpins our work, as well as kind of our approach. So barring certain potential errors, I think it shouldn't necessarily discredit the report. And moreover, these are kind of like easy things to double check. I mean, certainly on our website, we do have we post kind of summaries of our data. So yeah, I'll double check and look into that. But it's relatively easy to check some of these data points. So any current concerns that come up should be quickly alleviated.
Yeah, I was going to say, perhaps if you wouldn't mind, that would be really great if you could do that, and perhaps feed that back in through Lee's, and we can provide an update back to the committee.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just as a point of process, to note that we did have our administrative group, our land use tag review, and look over the information that was provided by Andrew, and some questions were asked about some of these different data points to Andrew, especially related to the city of Airdrie. So it has been reviewed. It's not pulled out of the sky. Each municipality was given an opportunity to look at it as well. So just something to note that although the genesis of why we did this report is not necessarily our typical process, it did go through our typical review process as well. So just something to note there.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Okay, we have, I thought I saw a hand up. Did I see a hand up? There we go. Mayor Peter Brown from Airdrie. Go ahead, Peter.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Andrew. There was a lot of data to review, Holy smokes. Appreciate all of that. I'm curious to know how quickly is it old news? How fast does this move? So you provide the data and all this information, and then when's the next time you come back to reevaluate where we sit? Is it 5 years, 2 years?
Yeah, we are beholden to the census schedule. So the next census is set for 2026. That data won't be released until 2027. So that's kind of our next point of refresh. Okay,
so I'm just the one that was the 1 in 5 single moms. I'm guessing, just looking at some of the stats, in 2020 there was like 41,000 single moms across the country. So where are they finding their housing currently? Because you don't see. I mean, I don't go everywhere in Canada, but I don't see a lot of families that are homeless. So if they're in need, where are they living? Are they with family, or do you capture that information? I'm sorry I missed it. There was a lot of information yesterday. I'm just trying to understand how this is all coming together.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. Yeah, all of those numbers would be, yeah, we're specifically single mother led households, which means that yeah, the way the census process is kind of going like door to door, collecting information, and whenever we refer to someone as leading a household, it means they're the what Stats calls the primary household maintainer. So they pay the majority of the shelter costs, and so that's kind of the data connection to how we would say, like, you know, this home is led by a single mother, and so, you know, these are yeah, where they live. I'm not sure exactly. We could, I guess, examine whether they're more likely to be renters or owners. I'd kind of expect them to be mostly renters, just by that kind of correlation, renters, low income. But I will kind of mention also that even among homelessness counts, that women tend to be undercounted due to their kind of fearing violence kind of on the streets and in shelters, tend to form what's called hidden homelessness. So couch surfing, staying with friends or families as much as possible, more so than males might. So I think I'll kind of leave it at that.
Okay, so sorry, just to follow up if I may, Mr. Chair. The number one need is single bedroom, correct?
Yes.
Or the lack of, sorry.
Yeah. Usually, and I think that's especially true in communities which have a lot of single family dwellings, single family detached homes. Those tend to be 3+ bedrooms, and tend to have a price that kind of goes along with that. Where we see a lot of housing need is kind of among smaller households, who, they're only one person, or maybe a couple, so they may not have the income to support buying a large home. But it's kind of a question of, would they be better off in a suitable home, 1 bedroom, probably not as nice as a single family dwelling, but affordable, and kind of what is the risk to them if they're kind of continuously paying unaffordable rents? Does that mean they're kind of progressing towards periods of homelessness? And I think that's kind of the concern.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. Deputy Mayor from Okotoks, apologies, Brent, for calling you Councillor previous. You're up. Go ahead.
Yeah, no apologies necessary. That's fine. I guess, again, going back to sort of the underlying purpose of generating these reports is to effectively get financing to build more housing, to reduce the core housing need number. That 10% figure in terms of core housing need in the CMRB municipalities. How does that maybe compare? Because you guys have done these, like, I think for a bunch of different regions or municipalities across the country. Like, how does that compare to other municipalities? Because ultimately we're going to be, having to make the case to the federal government, maybe provincial government, to get some of that funding or their funding agency. So I'm just curious, like, how we potentially rate both, in the current existing state that we have at the 10%, and then I think it's a little trickier in the projected core housing need to sort of express it as maybe a comparable. But if you've done it, I'd be really curious to know how we compare.
Yeah, good question. Thank you. Yeah, so the rate of core housing need across Canada in 2021 was 10%. So yeah, the CMR municipalities are kind of, overall right about that level. And I mean, among the municipalities, I think, yeah, Calgary was one of the higher ones at maybe around, I think it was around 10%. But there were a few communities that were down to 3% total core housing need. And so I think for these, funding programs, it's less about, saying, hey, we have more housing need than the people next door, but rather we have solutions. This data supports, how these solutions are going to, target and, remove households from housing need. And, our initiatives, with this data underpinning it, we'll do that. So I think this is kind of like, like the first step, but there's still the step of saying, what are we going to do about it, and how are we going to target some of the groups that experience disproportionate housing need with our initiatives.
Thank you very much. Deputy Mayor Robinson, anything further on that?
I guess I just have one other kind of follow up on that, which is, the requested recommendation is we recommend this to the board, maybe if there's touch ups in the data or whatever gets approved by the board. I guess, I don't know, maybe Hart can actually answer this or not, but like once it's approved by the board, can like individual municipalities rely on it to use it for their own applications? Like, I mean, obviously, I think it's important that CMRB has this type of housing plan for the region, but a lot of these applications and stuff like that go on, at the municipality level. Is there like any restriction or problems with an individual municipality using the data that applies to their own municipality for their own purposes?
Yeah, good question, Lisa. Can you, Lisa or Jordan, perhaps? I wonder if do you want to weigh in on that, or and Andrew, certainly feel free to supplement.
Well, I think Andrew could probably best speak to whether you can look at the line item for Okotoks, for example, and use that information. I know from us at the regional scale, we've done these population and employment projections before, and member municipalities, like as another example. And when you aggregate it and balance it and think about it as how you're going to approach a project, that's not the same thing as planning at the municipal scale. There's a certain level of detail that's needed there that studies like this don't have at the regional scale. But I'll have to let Andrew speak to whether or not you could use you could disaggregate it by member municipality, this particular report. But what we found is these are indicators and trends. It's like a triage system. And then that helps member municipalities either dig in a certain way or focus on a certain area, or it helps us to then focus in and get more information, build more data, and so on. So it's these regional reports for us tend to be more like triage tools that help us focus our attention and time, and then take the next step if it's of interest to the board to go really into a deep dive. So that's how we use them. And then I'll let Andrew speak to the report itself and how it can be disaggregated or not.
Yeah, I guess I would say that if you'd like your own housing needs report, we can do that. Also free of charge. We've again, we've been funded by CMHC to support communities, especially smaller communities who may not have kind of the planning department to be able to put together their own housing needs report. we can do it for each individual municipality. So you can certainly take what's taken in this report and use it for your own needs, but we can also prepare one specific for your community. And we can also dig into a bit more on certain questions if you have kind of specific requests. Again, like a lot of the data, can be disaggregated in different ways, and so I've tried to pick as part of this report, disaggregations that kind of speak to high-level trends. But if there are specific things you want to look at, we can explore that. So feel free to reach out.
No, I mean, I thought the ones that were provided were appropriate and useful, frankly.
That's great feedback, and Andrew, I think that's a fantastic offer and great information, I think, for the committee and all member municipalities to understand. So we'll make sure that everyone has your contact information should they wish to reach out. I imagine perhaps through TAG you may have already connected in that way, but I think that's probably something we can take away. Just make sure everybody knows how to contact you and contact Hart, because I think that is certainly the price is right. I think that's great news. Yeah. So, okay. So with that, anything else from the committee here while we still have Andrew with us? Okay, Andrew, thank you very much for that. Really do appreciate you joining us here today and sharing this. And yeah, I think on behalf of the committee, we really appreciate the depth of data that you've provided, the answers to the questions, and it really does help us continue to tackle a really big challenge here for this region in particular as we continue to experience significant growth. So thank you so much for that. And with that, I will invite a committee member to move that the committee recommend to the board for approval the Calgary Metro Region Housing Needs Assessment. Do I have a motion? Deputy Reeve Koken moves. Thank you. And do we have a seconder?
Great. Yeah, before I put that motion on the floor, I just wonder if it's not more appropriate that we receive it for information and not approval.
I had wondered about that, in fact, as I saw that motion. Do we have, I guess, Jordan or Lisa, any comments or thoughts on whether receive for information? Getting an agree here in the comments here from Mayor Brown. Any concerns that we simply receive this for information, Jordan?
So the only thing is we just want to ensure that the board is comfortable with the document, because as Lisa said, the reason for doing this is to use it in the integrated regional oh shoot, I forget the acronym now, but for the Infrastructure Canada Permanent Transit Fund and the regional funding stream, it was indicated that we would need this. So whether it's received for information, but I'm not sure why we're just receiving it for information. The study was conducted. Is there a concern with the veracity of the study?
Good question. I think maybe Deputy Koken, I'll maybe come back to you on that. And I wonder if perhaps so the idea is whether receive it for information or recommend for approval, we would still have another conversation at the board level. And at that level, perhaps we can be more specific about exactly what we're asking. But
so generally when we do reports, Chair Clark, we do approve them. So then it is essentially given the fact that the board agrees that the data in there is appropriate, and then we can use that study to say this is a board approved study, and we can use that study for things like, say, going forward for funding, or if something else comes up in the fall after the strategy session, to use it for a regional housing initiative should the board choose to do that.
Okay, so Lise, I see you're off mute, and then Councillor Carra will go to you.
Yeah, I was just going to add to what Jordan said. From a planning perspective, we do studies all the time and have consultants do studies on our behalf, and then we approve them by the board. It gives us a standing that this is reflective of the voice of the board and kind of the analytics about what's actually happening in the region. So we rely, I think, on on having that acknowledgement that this study has been approved by the board in order to inform our go forward. If it was only received for information, I'm not sure how we would use it and if we could use it in terms of thinking about our next steps and so on. So it, from our perspective, we've always approved these studies as the board, so that gives us the assurance that we can post this on our website, that it's reflective of something that the board is standing behind. So I would, from my perspective, just trying to coordinate all the angles, I would appreciate if it was approved, but of course, stand to the will of the committee.
Okay, good. We'll go to Councillor Carra. Go ahead.
Yeah, I endorse the advice we've just received from our administration. I think in light of major funds like the Canada Permanent Transit Fund, I expect there to be environmental funds and things like that coming down. Everything is going to be tied to housing. And I think this is a very high quality piece of work by one of the best, academic organizations or institutes pursuing analysis of housing in North America. If there are, some questions about some of the raw data, that approving it now does not prevent any ability to revise it. Although I'm sort of surprised we spent as much time talking about the veracity of the data or work. I think it's absolutely our role to take this and to endorse it so we can use it. And so for that reason, I would like to move it.
Okay, so I'll accept that motion from Councillor Carra. Do we have a second? Deputy Mayor Robinson seconds. Thank you very much. Any further discussion on that motion? Mayor Brown, you're up to speak. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm fine either way, I guess. I'm going to support the motion one way or the other, but I mean, to suggest that a report of this level of detail with the staff that we currently have at the CMRB, how are we going to implement something of this magnitude that's ever changing? We're building 1,300 different units a year here. I don't even know what Calgary's doing, et cetera, et cetera. So trying to understand what the difference is between, I still don't get receiving for information and acting upon it when the board provides direction to administration and staff, not the committee. I don't quite get why we're here, but I'm fine to support it one way or the other. It is what it is, but thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, good question. Lisa or Jordan, do you want to take that? I think we spoke to, you're exactly right that the committee can't direct administration necessarily to use it, but we would, having reviewed it, recommend for the board to approve, but ultimately it's up to the board to make that decision. But Lisa or Jordan, do you want to weigh in on that?
I think like all things that we do at the region, we are taking a regional view. And we are trying to scope what the problem is. This is essentially a background report for us, what we would normally call a background report that helps us understand the landscape of the issue that we're talking about, helps us frame out where the region might be useful, and the collaboration that the board offers could help improve some problem that is scoped out in this document. So essentially, this is a background report for us. It's not intended to tell municipalities how to invest their money in specific projects or anything like that. For us, it gives us enough information that we will be able to return to the board and help understand what the regional role could be, how the mayors and reeves together could act on this issue at the regional scale, and then potentially help member municipalities understand how they fit in and what they might do individually. So it's a very fast changing topic for sure. It's every project makes a difference for sure, but that's always true of anything that we tackle. We are always looking at this umbrella group and of things to think about, and this would be a form of basically a background report that would help us scope out with the board what else they would like to do in this. But without any background or information, it's almost impossible to be helpful. And so that's one reason why we're so appreciative of this report.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Lisa. Did I see Deputy Mayor Robinson with a hand up there? Or was that from earlier?
No, I took it down. That's okay. I think administration just covered off the point I was trying to make.
Got it. Perfect. Deputy Reeve Koken, you're up.
Yes, I'm thinking along the line of Mayor Brown there. This is indicated in the background report. There's really nothing as far as recommendations.
Sorry, Don, you seem to be breaking up there quite badly. I don't know, maybe try to mute and unmute again. Sorry, yeah, we having a hard time hearing you there.
Okay, how about now? Because I'm not seeing any difference from my end.
Yeah, unfortunately, it sounds like you're. I don't quite know what's happening on your end. It's very broken up. Having a hard time.
Try turning your camera off, Don.
Yeah.
Turning off the camera. Okay, I'll try. That may work. But now.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're still having some issues. Would you mind maybe just typing a comment into the chat? That might be the better way to go about it. And maybe we'll take a quick break and have you drop off and join again. That might be the thing. So, okay. And while we await that, and obviously interested in hearing what Deputy Kochen has to say, anyone else have any comments they wish to share while we're waiting? Maybe Deputy Kochen try again. Did that work?
How about now?
Yep, we got it 100%. Great. Fire away.
Okay, just hang on. I just got to get some volume going here because I cannot hear you. Great. Can you say something again?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good.
Loud and clear. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can hear you now too. No, I was just agreeing with Mr. Brown there. It's indicated that it is a background report and there's no real recommendations in there that we need to act upon. So it's just an information report. So it should be received as information. However, I'm not hung up either way.
Okay, I think we're getting there. Are we ready to move to a vote here? Anyone else?
I'll close if no one else wants to speak.
Sure, I do still have a hand up from Mayor Brown, but maybe from earlier. Peter, anything further? And if not, we'll just turn it over to Councillor Carra and then move into a vote.
No, let GC close, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I forgot to take my thing down.
Yeah, I guess as a close, I thought I'd just share where Calgary is at with numbers because it's interesting. And Peter asked, on any given year, we basically, the private sector delivers about 8,000 units of housing in Calgary, and our housing affordability, Home is Here strategy is looking to up that to a minimum of 9,000 units a year, every year on the market side. On the non-market side, we produce about 300 units a year, and we're looking to massively expand that to 3,000 units a year every year moving forward. And so that's the scale of the problem. And as I said, I think this report, endorses that move. I think maybe in the future we should maybe examine other wording like endorse for future use or something like that. But for now, we will do what we've always done and vote to support and for decision support this report. And with that, I'm closed.
Okay, thank you so much, Councillor Carra. So the motion on the floor then that the committee recommend to the board for approval, the Calgary Metro Region Regional Housing Needs Assessment, moved by Councillor Carra, seconded by Deputy Mayor Robinson. We'll do a vote on this. All those in favor? 2, 3. Mayor Brown, I don't see you on the camera. Right? 1, 2, 3.
Greg, were you voting by exception or?
No, sorry. I'm going to ask for a show of hands or a voice vote, please. Sorry, apologies. Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll just go all in. Asking again, all those in favor. Okay. Good. Okay, and any opposed? Great. That motion carries. Thank you so much. Okay, let's. Does anyone need a break, or should we keep rolling on into our next presentation here? All right, let's keep rolling here. We'll take a break after our next presentation. We've got Chad Willems from Environment and Protected Areas, here to provide us with a discussion about the draft Springbank Off-Stream Reservoir Land Use Plan, something that was in your packages, and I think, again, some more interesting information. Is Jamie? Jamie, you're here. There you are. Off mute. Can you give us a quick summary and introduction here to Chad? Go ahead, Jamie.
Thank you, Chair Clark. We're joined today by Chad Wilms, the Director of Land Use, Land and Environmental Planning South at Environment and Protected Areas. The committee may recall that we did have a presentation from Mr. Wilms a year ago regarding Springbank Off-Stream Reservoir. Chad is back today with an update on the Springbank Off-Stream Reservoir Project Draft Land Use Plan. And Chad was relocated from his home along the banks of the Bow River, when he lived in Calgary and worked for Rocky View County, and now resides along the North Saskatchewan River as the Director of Land Use and Environmental Planning South with Alberta Environment and Protected Areas. Having worked on land use planning across the province for the last decade, Chad's work is now predominantly focused on Crown lands in southern Alberta's eastern slopes to manage the cumulative effects from multiple activities to maintain the region's cultural importance to Indigenous peoples, the headwaters of southern Alberta's rivers, and the diversity of flora and fauna. Chad, I will hand it over to you, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair and committee members, for having me back to present the draft land use plan that we've now developed for the Springbank Off-Stream Reservoir project. And Jamie, I think you have the presentation lined up for me. Is that correct? Great. Thank you. You can go on to the next slide. So I think it's important to acknowledge the lands and the history on which we reside. I'm joining you from Treaty 6 territory today in Edmonton, but I'd like to acknowledge that this project, the Springbank project, takes place west of Calgary in southern Alberta within the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, including the Siksika, Piikani, and the Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations. The Calgary region is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, District 4. Having lived across Alberta, I grew up not knowing about the signing of the treaties, as it wasn't taught in school at that time. It's only as an adult that I learned about the impacts of European settlement. Education is part of our journey towards truth and reconciliation, but action is also required. We all share these lands. We are all treaty people. Next slide, please. So about a year ago, when I joined you, I provided a bit more of an in-depth overview of the Springbank Off-Stream Reservoir project and gave an update on construction and gave an overview of the anticipated planning process for the land use plan. Today, I'm going to be focusing not on the project itself or construction activities, but focused on the draft land use plan, which we've recently completed and is currently out for public engagement. Next slide, please. Just a quick history as to what gave rise to this project. The flood of 2013 in southern Alberta remains one of Canada's most costly natural disasters. I know many of you were directly impacted by this flood event, and it affected all of your communities. I used to live in Calgary, in Inglewood, along the banks of the Bow River. I wasn't living there, and I appreciate seeing my former councillor on the call here today. I wasn't living in Calgary during 2013. My house that I lived in was actually spared during that flood, but many of my neighbors were flooded out. So I have pretty strong connection to this event also. Next slide, please. So following the flood of 2013, there were numerous mitigation projects that were constructed, some of which are still being planned or are under construction, both within Calgary and both upstream and downstream communities. Springbank Off-Stream Reservoir is the major infrastructure project that was planned for and is now under construction along the Bow River to help mitigate future floods for downstream communities. The project site itself is west of Calgary within Rocky View County within the Springbank community. These lands were previously privately owned, predominantly privately owned and used for agriculture and ranching. And I really want to acknowledge that this is right in the heart of the Springbank community. It's central to Rocky View County. And this project caused a lot of difficulty for not only directly impacted landowners on which the project was to reside, but also just for the community as a whole, as it's right in the heart of the community. There was a lot of opposition and concern with this project, but it has moved forward. But it has been and remains very impactful to the community. The province did have to acquire the private lands and convert them to Crown ownership in order to proceed with the project. But with now having these new Crown lands on the landscape, it really creates an opportunity, both for First Nations, in that there is now an opportunity for new Crown lands being available for the exercise of treaty rights, but also we're looking at trying to enable and create some positive legacy for the Springbank community in having these Crown lands available also for public use. Next slide, please. So the map on the right, just to orient everybody who maybe isn't as familiar with the project site. This is west of Calgary, just south of highway number 1, which is along the north side of the map. The interchange with highway 22 heads north and south there and intersects the reservoir lands. And to the south of the Elbow River on this map is highway 8. Springbank Road is an east-west road which intersects the middle of the reservoir. The headworks then, facility operates by the headworks within the Elbow River, diverting floodwaters offstream of the Elbow River to reduce the amount of flow that's traveling downstream and thereby reducing the flood peak during flood events. And that flood peak, or that volume of water, will be diverted offstream and will be diverted into the reservoir lands, which is shown there in the green and gray, impounded by the yellow identified dam on this map and held until the flood risk has passed. And the water from the reservoir will then be released in a controlled manner back into the Elbow River to continue back downstream. This project has involved multiple government ministries, most notably Transportation and Economic Corridors, who led the entire application process and received approvals both from provincial and federal regulators. And they are also overseeing construction of the project site. Environment and protected areas, we are leading the land use planning process for how the land within the reservoir will be used while maintaining operational requirements. There are also other parts of the department involved in this project, most notably Fish and Wildlife, who are managing wildlife and hunting activities within this area. Agriculture and irrigation, they will be the future site operator. They'll be managing both the dam and also the reservoir lands, and they'll be responsible largely for implementation of the land use plan. And Indigenous Relations has been supporting the work throughout the project, and in particular supporting the work with First Nations. Next slide, please. Quick snapshot of the timeline of the project. So between 2014 and 2021, the project was under the development stage, scoping out what the project could look like and going through regulatory approval process. It was approved, and then in early 2022, construction began on site. Between 2022 and until today, we have been working on developing a draft land use plan. That draft land use plan has now been released for public and Indigenous engagement. We're anticipating, or that will be wrapped up in the next month here now, and then throughout the spring we'll be making updates as required to the draft plan to finalize that plan and move it forward for approvals. Following that, the land use plan will be implemented and will be ready to go by the time construction is complete and operations of the site begins in 2025. Next slide, please. For developing the draft land use plan, we work closely with two committees. First is the First Nations Committee, which is made up of First Nation communities from across Treaty 6 and Treaty 7 lands. And discussions with them have been ongoing for the last 2 years. And its discussions have really been focused on the ability to exercise treaty rights and traditional uses, and have also focused on other elements, including environmental management, land management, and creating cultural opportunities on site. We also struck what we call the Joint Land Use Advisory Committee, which was a committee involving representatives from both First Nation and Métis groups, area, municipalities, non-government organizations, local landowners that live directly adjacent to or around the reservoir lands, and also local community groups. We worked with this committee throughout 2022, and in early 2023, they submitted a recommendations report to government for our consideration in developing the draft land use plan. And it involved topics including water management, ecological values, recreation, and really the focus of their work was on how to enable and support public access into the reservoir lands. Next slide, please. For developing the land use plan, I mean, we had to consider multiple different factors, including the recommendations report from the Joint Land Use Advisory Committee, discussions with the First Nation Committee. We also had to work with the cross-ministry group of subject matter experts within government, with a particular focus on the groups that will be responsible for future implementation of the land use plan. We do, of course, have to work with the constraints and the direction provided by the applicable legislation and associated regulations, and also with the direction provided by both provincial and federal regulators and the approval conditions that were placed on the project. Next slide, please. In your package, you'll have a link to the draft land use plan. I have provided page numbers throughout the next series of slides to reference which page numbers I'm speaking about, but I do want to just provide a quick overview of some of the highlights of the draft land use plan, and the direction it provides for use and access. So this is a table of contents. It's a fairly short document. It's under 30 pages. But as an overview, it provides direction for access management, development on site, and then we have 3 policy categories, which are really prioritized for use of the site. The primary use of the site, of course, is for flood mitigation, project operations, and land management. We then are prioritizing First Nation access and use of the project lands, and then secondary to that is public access and use of the project lands. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, the site will be managed as a reservoir. It's an off-stream reservoir, and it will be managed, and we need to ensure that operational requirements can be met. The site will be managed by our Water Infrastructure and Operations branch within Agriculture and Irrigation, and we have some direction provided there to ensure the site can be safely operated and managed. Some of the land management roles will also involve the Ministries of Forestry and Parks and also Environment and Protected Areas. Adaptive management is really critical to this project. In managing an off-stream reservoir that's used for flood mitigation purposes, it's new in Alberta. It's the first of this magnitude, and it's one of the few that will be found continentally. So there's a lot to learn in how to manage this type of infrastructure and how to ensure that we can both be nimble and responsive to perhaps sudden flood events. And therefore, we need to maintain certain restrictions on site to maintain the operational requirements. But as we go forward, the department will be learning how to manage both the site and also the land, and so adaptive management is really critical to allow for changes in how the site is managed in the future. Next slide, please. Restrictions will be placed for all public access on certain parts of the project site. The three main locations are identified here. A is down next to the Elbow River where the diversion infrastructure is in place. This is where a lot of the concrete is currently being poured or has been poured that you may have seen from Highway 22. This is where the water gets diverted off the Elbow River and into the diversion channel. B then on this map shows the diversion channel. There won't be any public access available in the diversion channel. This channel then flows underneath Highway 22. Highway 22 is now a bridge over the channel. When not being used for flood conveyance, that diversion channel is expected to help support wildlife movement under Highway 22. And by allowing public in there, it provides both a public safety concern in the event of an unexpected flood event, but also would be impacting the use of that area for wildlife. And C then is the low-level outlet works, which is the essentially the corridor or the tube in place that's underneath the dam that will allow for the water that's impounded within the reservoir to be released back into the Elbow River. So that's another cement structure that can be seen from the surrounding lands. Just due to public safety issues, we want to be restricting public access into and around that structure. Next slide, please. There's also going to be temporal closures around high-risk periods or around like sensitive periods of time in which we don't want the public to be accessing the reservoir. That includes immediately post-construction. So after the construction is complete in 2025 and the site becomes operational, we're looking at closing the site for 2 full growing seasons, both to allow for the land to recuperate from construction activities. Restoration activities will be underway on sites that were disturbed during construction, and it's a way to just help let the land rest, as well as to complete all the planning necessary for operations of the site. Annually, there will be a flood closure between May and July. This is the period of highest flood risk along the Elbow River, and the site needs to be closed just due to public safety concerns in the event of a flood event that has a little warning in which we need to be using the reservoir lands. There could be other emergencies in which we need to close down the reservoirs, a flood outside of the flood season, or other emergencies such as wildfire. After a flood, there will be a requirement for restoration of impacted lands, and for those lands that are undertaken, where reclamation is undertaken, there will be a need to also close down that site for a period of 2 growing seasons to allow for reclamation to properly take place before the public can enter those lands again. And then there will be a need also for periodic closures of at least portions of the reservoir and the project lands for maintenance and other discretionary activities. Next slide, please. So again, the primary use of the site is for flood mitigation, operations, and land management. And in Section 5, we have a series of policy statements to provide direction to ensure that the site is managed appropriately for its intended purpose, and to ensure that there is public safety for use in and around the site. Vegetation management is also critical to ensure that the reservoir lands themselves do maintain intact vegetation communities, both for wildlife, for potential use of grazing, and also just for general public enjoyment. Next slide, please. After flood operations, the primary use then, or the priority use, is for First Nations access and use of the project lands. And we are looking at supporting First Nations exercise of treaty rights and traditional uses. And this includes hunting, trapping, and fishing for food, and gathering of plant materials or other ceremonial activities on site. We are also looking at setting up a First Nation Land Use Implementation Committee. There's a commitment to stand up this committee for at least the next 10 years once operations have began, to ensure that they have a connection into site operations and are supportive of implementation of the land use plan. Next slide, please. So this slide is probably of greatest interest to the group. I mean, this is about public access and use. We received lots of input from the Joint Land Use Advisory Committee on this topic, which is really focused around how does the public appropriately use this site. So the reservoir lands, again shown in green here, will be supportive of public use and access outside of closure periods, and will be supportive of public using the site for low impact recreational activities, including walking, hiking, nature appreciation, bird watching, hunting, cross-country skiing. There won't be any built infrastructure within the reservoir. There's no intention of building trails or turning this into any kind of a recreation destination. In fact, that's one of the key points that we heard from the committee, is that there isn't the desire to turn this into a recreation destination, but rather to allow for more passive recreation and public use activities. We do need to, though, create some restrictions on site for activities that wouldn't be compatible with both public safety and also with the site being for flood mitigation. So there will be restrictions on motorized recreation, on the construction of any structures on site, the use of watercraft. There will be restrictions on overnight camping and the use of flames or fires within site, because wildfire risk or fire risk is for sure a concern, both for on-site but also for surrounding landowners. One point that we heard very clearly from the advisory committee is the desire for access and use across the project site as a way to support active transportation across the broader community. Springbank Road, as many may know, and Highway 22 is regularly used, particularly by cyclists who are cycling through this region. It's a very popular spot for cycling as well as for pedestrians. There will be a maintenance road along the crest of the dam, which is shown in yellow there, and along the diversion channel up to Highway 22. That maintenance road will be a gravel road, and we will be permitting and allowing the public to use that maintenance road to travel across the project site. We're still working on how to link that maintenance road into the surrounding community and into the adjacent range roads. Those details haven't been finalized, but we will be working on ensuring that there is connectivity from particularly the east abutment of the dam into one of the surrounding range roads to support broader connectivity across the landscape. And we're also looking for making accommodations for Rocky View County to identify this area to support future regional active transportation alignments. Hunting has been permitted on site when these lands were privately held. There were, though, 2 wildlife management units in different sets of regulations in place, or direction from the regulations in place for how hunting is to occur on both the east and the west side of Highway 22, which intersects the reservoir lands. So we are looking at making an adjustment to the wildlife management boundaries to encompass all of the reservoir lands within Wildlife Management Unit 212, which is the eastern portion of Highway 22. Wildlife Management Unit 212 does allow for archery and primitive weapons to be used for hunting in the fall, for recreational hunting, whereas west of Highway 22 does allow also for the use of rifles. For public safety, for those who may be on site, and also for surrounding landowners, we're looking at changing the entire reservoir lands to be encompassed within WMU 212 to allow only for archery and primitive weapons to be used for hunting purposes. I just want to note that this doesn't apply to treaty hunters. Treaty hunters aren't bound by our hunting regulations. They are able to hunt year-round on Crown lands, and will only be restricted by restrictions that we have in place for access onto on site. There's also been concern expressed about use of site for use of weapons for non-hunting purposes. You know, think about like shooting targets or shooting coyotes and gophers and other non-game species, which aren't listed within the hunting regulations. We didn't want this to be a destination for target shooters. And so we will be putting restrictions in place for the use of weapons for non-hunting purposes also, as well as restrictions placed on trapping, sport fishing, and fish harvesting. But I also want to note that currently there's no water on site. And when the site is flooded, there will be restrictions on public access into the reservoir. So boating and angling opportunities won't be permitted also when the site is filled with water during a flood event. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, we are trying to ensure that the site is operational feasible and can be managed as a unique piece of infrastructure within the province. We need to ensure that it operates in a way that safeguards downstream communities from future flood events, but we are also trying to ensure that we're supportive of First Nation use and access and their ability to exercise treaty rights and traditional uses on site, but also are supportive of the use of the site by the public, and in particular the local Springbank community. The draft land use plan is currently out for public engagement. Our public engagement closes this Sunday. So if you haven't seen the public survey yet, you still have time to go to the website listed here and have a review of the draft plan and provide feedback to us. First Nation engagement will be taking place for another month. We do engage with the First Nations for a period of 60 days, and that engagement will close on April 14th. Next slide, please. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Chad. That was, again, a very comprehensive presentation and a good summary. We will go to Deputy Reeve Koken from Rocky View County. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Greg. Chad, yeah, thank you for the overview. Very good information sitting there. And as I think most of the board members should know, that this project is within the Rocky View County, and it's got the biggest impact on the county and for the benefit of Calgary. And as is pointed out by Chad, the community in the area was very skeptical and very much, I think, opposed to this project. However, they are basically moving on, and they're still skeptical, though, however, as far as how this project is going to be impacting them overall. And Chad, I know that you've said that you are collecting feedback from a variety of sources, and one being a task force, and there's community groups that have been advised, and now you've got this public engagement system ongoing. And you've also solicited feedback from Rocky View County directly, and the feedback that I understand that has been provided was feedback relative to how the restrictions on the use were going to be enforced, how the parking was going to be managed for the area as far as the different access points that were going to be allowed. Some of the aspects as far as weed control, who is going to be responsible for that, who's going to be looking after that, who is going to be responsible for the operation and maintenance of the roads within the SR1, and also certainly as far as how the different pathways could and should be coordinated through the area, including the SR1. And my understanding is that this feedback was provided well before this draft land use plan, and none of the feedback has been incorporated. And I was just curious as far as why it hasn't.
So thank you for the question. There's quite a few points that you raised there, and all of them are fully applicable to the project. A lot of the points that were raised and a lot of the feedback that we've received are dealing, some of those points are dealing with operations of the site and also construction activities. So we have heard about the desire for parking, and parking for public access into the site is part of the work that's currently being done as part of construction of the overall project. Some of those locations haven't yet been identified in exactly where they'll be located, but there is the intention to have a parking lot, a small parking lot, somewhere along the eastern portion of the dam near the eastern abutment. There is also to be a roadside pull-off somewhere along Springbank Road, which will likely be somewhere within the middle of the reservoir lands. But those details are actually currently with Alberta Transportation and working with their on-site construction contractors. And so those type of details don't show up in the land use plan. The land use plan is really intended to provide direction for future use and ongoing use and access of the lands, as opposed to some of those more detailed either construction elements or operational elements. You also raised weed control, which is for sure a very big issue on site. Following a flood event, there will of course be a lot of sediment laid down within the reservoir, and that will create, largely a barren substrate in which weeds will undoubtedly take hold. That's not also part of a land use plan, which is focused on how to enable and support public access. But there is already a wetland and vegetation management plan in place, and weed control will be part of that and will be part of ongoing operations of the site. After a flood event, depending on the severity and the size of it, that will determine how extensive the impacts are to the vegetation on site. And after each flood event, there will have to be a case-by-case assessment made as to the extent of the impacts and also the required restoration that's needed, both to control weeds, but also to restore native vegetation back on site. But yeah, I guess I just want to let the committee know that there are a lot of different elements to this entire project, and a lot of different plans, including operational planning and safety planning in place, which go outside of the direction that the land use plan itself provides direction on.
Okay, so Chad, to understand then, before the land use plan actually is going to get adopted and approved, there will be an operational plan that will be in sync with this land use plan?
The operational plan will likely come afterwards. There's current work taking place by Agriculture and Irrigation on that operations plan. I'm not sure at what point they'll be finished with it, but the land use plan itself, we are looking at finishing this up in the springtime or by early summer. But the operations plan itself will be how the site is actually operated. And there are for sure linkages and integration between the two plans. But the operations plan will be finished at a later date.
Well, I think I'd be rather concerned if I didn't have a proper operations plan. Why would we be approving a land use plan? Because if the land use plan is not going to work operationally, I think they have to be in sync.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Is there some way that we can have some comfort that the operational plan will be well underway before the land use plan gets approved, so that we understand that indeed operationally this will work, this land use plan will work? Because there's a lot of items here as far as especially the parking and the weed control and enforcement, even as far as the use, the restrictions on the use. That's going to be a little bit of a nightmare as far as trying to get that enforced and whose responsibility is for that enforcement to occur.
We have been working closely with Agriculture and Irrigation and the future site operators on the land use plan. I mean, they've been involved in the entire development of this plan to ensure that the direction that it provides will be implementable and aligned with what they're anticipating future operations to look like. There is flexibility within the land use plan to create some adjustments based on future operational needs. We want to ensure that the overarching management intent and direction is set through the land use plan, but to allow some flexibility to adjust to future operational needs.
Okay.
Great. Thanks for that. That was a very, very good questions. Anyone else have any questions for Chad here while we've got him? All right. Well, thank you. With our thanks, Chad, we really appreciate you you joining us. I will invite a member to make a motion that the committee receive for information a presentation on the draft Springbank Offstream Reservoir Land Use Plan. Who wishes to make such a motion?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I had a question in the chat there.
Yeah, go ahead, Peter. Peter Brown from Airdrie. Go ahead.
No, there was a question in the chat. Just wondered if you could answer that.
Is there?
You see it? Land use plan does not include reference to MGA South Saskatchewan Regional Plan or other municipal or regional planning documents. Has the government of Alberta included these other planning documents and acts in the development of the SR1 and land use plan?
Okay, so sorry, I don't see that. I wonder if that maybe was sent to someone specifically as opposed to the whole chat. But Chad, did you get that?
No, I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question? And I also don't see it within the chat.
Yeah, and there's something wrong with this go-to from the last session we had. I got to get IT to fix this because it's all red too, actually. So just a second here. I want to make sure.
If it's red, you'll probably see a note underneath it will say only two and then a name. And then, yeah. Regardless, maybe just read it out again, Peter. That's probably the best way to do it.
Yeah, no, 100%. Just a second. I gotta pull it up here. Hold on. So the land use plan does not include reference to the MGA South Saskatchewan Regional Plan or other municipal or regional planning documents, as the government of Alberta included these other planning documents and acts in the development of the SR1 land use plan.
Great question. So they aren't referenced. The lands that the land use plan is directing is focused on provincial crown lands. So although we want to ensure that there's consistency and continuity with the surrounding lands managed under the MGA and specifically Rocky View County, I mean, we are not directing any activities outside of the project lands and outside of provincial crown lands. So the MGA isn't referenced there, as it isn't guiding legislation for the reservoir lands and the land use plan itself. There was also discussion around how to best approve and enable this land use plan. And for sure, the Alberta Land Stewardship Act and the South Saskatchewan Regional Plan was considered as one way to approve this. But ultimately, I mean, it hasn't been approved yet, but we're anticipating that we'll be approving this under the Provincial Water Act to ensure that the land use plan is aligned with the legislation that supports site operations. And so the Water Act will likely be the enabling legislation.
And you may have already answered this to Don, and I apologize if you're repeating yourself, but how will or could adjacent lands uses be impacted by the SR1 and the proposed land use?
I'm sorry, how would surrounding land be impacted?
Yes.
So some of the concerns that we've heard from surrounding landowners is trespassing for the public that will be accessing the reservoir lands. There is concern about trespassing outside of the reservoir lands and onto adjacent private lands. There have also been concerns expressed about fire and wildfire starting on site and spreading onto surrounding lands, as well as weeds, which we've talked about, and the spread of weeds from on site after a flood event into surrounding lands. And we are trying to address those concerns, both with some of the restrictions that we have on site for how the public can use and access the site. Also by building a fence around the reservoir lands, which will be a wildlife friendly fence to allow for passage of wildlife, but just to delineate where the extent of the reservoir lands are and to identify then, private lands to help ensure that the public is staying within the reservoir lands themselves. And then with the concern with the weeds spreading into surrounding lands, there is a vegetation management plan in place, and it will be future site operations that will be responsible for assessing and controlling the spread of weeds.
Okay, Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great questions again. Thank you for that. And thank you, Chad, for the responses. Any further questions here before we move to a motion? And hearing none, seeing nothing in the chat, I will now again ask for a motion that the committee receive for information a presentation on the draft Springbank off-stream reservoir land use plan.
Happy to make that motion, Mr. Chair.
All right,
Peter
so we've
from
got Mayor Brown and Deputy Reeve Koken. Is that a second from you or a question?
I'll second it.
Great, thank you very much. Moved by Mayor Brown, second by Deputy Reeve Koken. And all those in favor then, please, we'll do a hands up or a voice vote, please. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. That motion carries. Chad, thank you again. Very much appreciate the update and the information you've shared with us. I will now declare us on break here for 5 minutes or so. We'll come back.
This conference is This
joining us.
conference will now be recorded.
Thank you. Just click the cameras back on, and we will get going here again. All right, the next three agenda items here represent more of a quick update, I think, than necessarily a really substantive back and forth. But that said, we'll obviously open things up for questions and comment on all three issues, and I'm sure more than that. So with that, I will hand it over to Jamie Graves for a brief update on the scoping phase of the Regional Transportation and Transit Master Plan. Jamie, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Clark. Good morning to the committee. As we summarized in the agenda package, administration's been working on scoping the Regional Transportation and Transit Master Plan for about a year or so. Since the last update to committee in October, we've met a number of times with the Transportation and Transit TAG. That includes member municipality staff, as well as staff from Transportation and Economic Corridors. And we're developing, adjusting, evolving the scope. And the draft charter continues to be refined in consultation with those folks. We're providing this update today, following committee's direction to report back to LUSC in Q1 of 2024. And so here we are, Q1. We are anticipating that a draft final scope, or a final draft of the scope, will be available for review and approval in the coming 1 to 2 months. So just by way of brief update of where we're at, noting that the best practice research that was completed for the process noted that regions with successful transportation and mobility plans have two separate documents, sort of way to think about them, as that guide the regional transportation planning and transit planning. One that provides a longer term aspirational view of optimized regional transportation system, and then one that provides a shorter term list of prioritized projects and priorities that work to build that overall long-term optimized system. So those lists are created in consideration of funding partners. And through that, we find ourselves designing the scope in two parts. First being a longer term visionary and aspirational plan that identifies sort of policy and the regional transportation system and strategies for optimizing that system. And it should consist of things like maps, definitions, and noting exactly what the subject matter we're talking about is, of course, identifying how the region would achieve some of the reductions in vehicle kilometers traveled, so mimicking some of the benefits that were approved and highlighted in the growth plan, and decreasing infrastructure costs as well to realize that benefit, again, that is noted in the growth plan related to transportation. And then that part would also provide or propose some specific strategies to achieve the results that would align with that board objective and those metrics, including the reduction in cost and reduction in vehicle kilometers traveled per household. And possible strategies could improve access, could include improve access to transit, active transportation, like walking and wheeling, again, optimizing the road network, deferring and major investments in favor of others, and improving corridor planning and improve transit-oriented development and planning around transit hubs. So other actions potentially and policies may also come out of that to improve the system, and how the results will be monitored and reported over time. Knowing what our metrics are can help us sort of track our progress over time. And then again, noting that second part being those priorities lists, or focusing on funding projects in sort of a shorter term. And that would be those taking those steps to action portions of that longer term vision in a certain time step by identifying highest priority projects that would be needed to achieve, again, those outcomes as noted in the growth plan about reducing vehicle kilometers traveled and the requirement of investment dollars. So that process would also result in designing and incorporating selection criteria to score those individual projects and make sure that they are in alignment with the needs of funding partners, so that we do see that investment into the region. Again, to my point that we will be back hopefully in the next 1 to 2 months with a scoping document for review and recommendation to the board. And with that, Chair Clark, I'm happy to answer questions that the committee may have today.
All right, Jamie, thank you so much for that update. Committee, any questions or comments on the update on the RTTMP? So again, I think we'll have an opportunity, as Jamie says here, in the next couple of months here to have a bit of a deeper weigh in. So we've got a couple of folks on the list. We'll start with Peter in Airdrie and Councillor Carra after that. Peter, go ahead.
I always like following Councillor Carra. I'm surprised I got ahead of him. What's going on with that? So thanks for the presentation. So I guess one of the questions is what will be the role of the Land Use Servicing Committee over the next 6 to 12 months on the RTTMP project specifically?
Thanks for the question, Mayor Brown. Yes, the committee's work is to review those upcoming scope documents, which it's the final deliverable out of this project, which is the scoping. So coming to that final deliverable of what it is that the scope would entail and that overall kind of high level timeline and an estimated budget so that we can plan for our budget cycles upcoming. So those would be the expectation of the LUSC as the working committee before it goes to the board for final approval.
Okay, and a follow-up, if I may, how does the government of Alberta's budget announced? I think they're going to invest like $9 million to develop a passenger trail master rail alignment or something. Will that impact the RTTMP?
Thanks for the question again, Mayor Brown. We are trying to be connected and stay connected with the developments of the both orders of government, provincially and federally. So incorporating those where and when possible. As you know, that intention for that plan has been only released very recently. So we're still in the understanding mode of what it is that might entail and how we might consider that with our regional work.
Okay, and the last one, Jamie, is kind of, do you see sort of any impact on the economic well-being of, as it relates to the work on the RTTMP across the region, I guess, for both urban and rural municipalities?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Mayor Brown. This is a key aspect that was identified in the growth plan, but also in the regional economic development work of MNP, that when regions plan together and have those common understanding of where they're going or have a vision together, that brings certainty and economic development and can often be very, although spin-off benefits, but certainly is very much in support of a region's economic development and their ability to connect people to jobs, to connect goods and services, not only within the region, but to points extra regionally, be it Canamex corridor, be it, the port to inland port, et cetera. So certainly there are lots of benefits of regional transportation planning.
Excellent, thanks, Jamie.
Okay, over to Councillor Carra, GC, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to move this. I can tell you that members of the tag team from the City of Calgary administration are expressing, real pleasure at how we're scoping this and how the work's proceeding and how everything's going. And I appreciate the update, but I just want to send it back to you guys so you can finish the work and get it to us. I think this is really important, and I'm very pleased that it's all on the right track. I'm looking forward to seeing the finished thing. So I'm happy to move it if there's no further discussion.
Okay, with that, I will happily accept the motion that the committee receive an update on scoping the Regional Transportation and Transit Master Plan project. Do we have a second for that? Deputy Mayor Robinson, thank you very much. Any further discussion on this before we move to the vote? And okay, given we're just receiving for information on this, anyone wishing to vote opposed to that motion to receive this for information? Seeing, hearing none, that carries unanimously. Thank you so much. Okay, and now, Jamie, I think you're still up. We can give us a quick update on where things are on drought response. Obviously, a very hot and important topic. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Clark. So I don't have a lot at this time to update with, which is why I brought just a verbal update, but I can say that we have met with our TAG members and at a high level have been discussing member municipalities' responses to ministers' letters and internal actions preparing for anticipated drought conditions, some of the early education messaging and kind of plans for connecting residents with direction around what the future months the municipalities can and what residents can expect from municipalities in the coming months. So we will have more to report at upcoming meetings, but that's where that stands at this time. We're plan to come back with more information in the future.
Good. So just an update. We're continuing to work on it, obviously. Any questions here for Jamie or for administration as we move along on the drought question? And if there are none, I will invite a motion the committee receive a verbal update on CMRB drought response. Do we have a motion for that? Deputy Reeve Waldorf, thank you.
I'll second that, Mr. Chair. Peter
Okay,
from
Mayor Brown, thank you very much. Any further debate or discussion? And by exception, anyone wishing to vote opposed? Seeing, hearing none, carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Jamie, one more time. You've given us, we've touched on a number of these topics today, but we've got an update here on the board and strategic initiatives underway. Go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Clark. As by way of an update, a lot of the projects that we had ongoing the last year are coming to generally a close. One of them that we will be bringing more information to the board on in April is the Indigenous relations work. So although committee doesn't connect in on that project, just as I know there is a lot of overlap from this committee to the board, you can anticipate receiving more information on that in April. And as noted, the February board meeting resulted in the approval of the roadmap. And so that project's now closed and we are now starting to work on some of those next steps, which were a few of the recommendations therein. So more to come, but just so you know, we are tracking our projects, things are going well, and more to come essentially is the overall message. Thank you, Chair Clark.
Okay, great. Appreciate that update. You've all had a chance to look at the, I guess, the dashboard that was shared in the agenda package. Any questions on that or anything that Jamie's brought us up to speed on? And if there are none, I will invite a motion that the committee receive for information, an update on board strategic initiatives. May I
Happy to move that, Mr. Chair. Peter from Airdrie.
Okay. Mayor Brown, seconded by Reeve Kissel. Any further discussion or debate? And by exception, anyone wishing to vote opposed to that? And seeing, hearing none, carries unanimously. Okay. We don't formally have a roundtable on the agenda, but is there anything else under roundtable or anything anyone wishes to raise here while we're still all together? Okay. Mayor Brown, go ahead, Peter. Oh, is that just a hand up to move previous? Or you want to go ahead?
No, I'm good. Sorry. I guess it's looking, and I apologize because I'm not I'm just backing up Councillor Petro today, but I look at the level of detail in these reports and how there's such an incredible moving target on across the spectrum. Knowing our staff capacity, I guess it's for Jordan. How will this work? How will this get done? I'm really kind of I just don't understand, and believe me, we have some outstanding people in this organization, but with the work that's being done within the region, within the subcommittees, with all of the different connections within the current municipal work that's being done by our own staff, how is this supposed to how will this work, I guess, and be something that the region will actually be able to work through and implement? And that's I guess I feel like we're going in a big direction. Maybe that's more of a conversation for at the board level, but I can't imagine how much needs to be done in order to, just forgetting about the first topic we talked about around housing, which seems to be now part of the region, I guess. And I'll stop talking now, Jordan. I'm just, maybe you know where I'm going with this, but I just find it overwhelming, and I'm not the one doing the work. So thank you. I appreciate the time, Mr. Chair.
You bet.
Thanks for the question and comment, Peter. I would say that capacity is definitely a top of mind issue for me in terms of the staff's ability to undertake. As you noted, these things become moving targets as we start them. Sometimes they get bigger, sometimes they get smaller. As noted by Lisa earlier today, we are planning a board strategic session in September, and that would help inform budgeting for 2025 and onward. And really part of that is to answer the questions in terms of what does the board want to be as we have moved through a transition period from approving the growth and servicing plan and implementing the growth and servicing plan onto the next. So does the board see a regional role for housing, hypothetically, as it was just a topic for today? And what would that effort be? And does the board want to either contribute additional funds in order to be able to do that work, or decide that that is not a place where they want to use the resources of the CMRB? So definitely a live question for us, as well as with the water roadmap, starting to implement that. We do have budget for consultants, and that is something that we would be bringing back to the board for approval as we move forward to give us the support that we need in order to do the work that the board has determined as a priority for this year. But definitely in outlying years, and even this year, it's really an issue of if something's going to come onto the plate, something has to come off the plate. We are pretty much at capacity right now, and working with your administrations, we recognize that they are also at capacity. And so we're going to have to make some decisions coming up here, and I'm looking forward to that conversation with the board in the fall.
Thanks, Jordan, and good question as well, Peter. GC, I think you had your hand up there. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just thought I'd throw. Last Friday, I had the opportunity to go down to the riding of Fish Creek and visit the successor to Richard Gottfried as MLA, Miles McDougall, who is now the chair of the Calgary caucus of UCP MLAs. He and I share a passion for the Premier's commitment to establishing a regional rail system in Alberta. And we had an interesting conversation about sort of the challenges facing, the fight to figure out whether it's Calgary to Edmonton first or Calgary to Banff first, and whether those are separate projects or not. And, that is work that is underway right now with funded studies. But what I wanted to share with you was something that he sort of added to my sort of understanding, which is challenging. At least CABR, which is Calgary Airport to Banff Rail, and maybe to a certain extent the Prairie Link, which is to a lesser extent the Prairie Link, which is the Calgary to Edmonton proposals, P3 proposals, are both dependent on significant funding from the Canada Infrastructure Bank. And Mr. McDougall related to me that it is his expectation that the Canada Infrastructure Bank may cease to exist if Pierre Poilievre becomes prime minister, which is what all polling is indicating. And so he sort of indicated that there is a limited window to, give a thumbs up to that project and to lock funding from this entity before this entity potentially ceases to exist. So I wanted to just throw that out to everyone for your consideration, because it adds an added sense of urgency as far as I'm concerned, if that's a funding stream that we want to help us get to that regional vision that I hope we all share.
Yeah, that's a obviously important dynamic, I guess, for us to be aware of, and so I think maybe the team and all of us can take that under advisement as we develop our TTMP and other projects. And to Peter's question about prioritization and resourcing, probably factor that in as we continue these discussions. So I think that's a good point. Deputy Mayor Robbins, Brent, go ahead.
I guess I guess maybe that's the question I have is I haven't seen I'm sorry if I missed it, a CMRB sort of take on budget announcements and whether or not those are aligned with our current sort of directions and planning, and whether or not anything's got to change based on stuff that was funded or not funded in the budget. I'm sorry if I've missed it. If it's there, you can just say, go read this document. But like, have we done any work like that, or do we have any thoughts about that?
Happy to jump in on that. In years past, I had done a simple note talking about funding to the organization, as it was a changing or evolving funding platform in terms of going from the 2 million down to 1 million. I did not do one this year only because it is the same, that the government of Alberta has maintained funding for the CMRB through the Alberta Community Partnership Grant Program at $1 million for both growth management boards. So it was the no news, and so I didn't send out a note this year.
Thanks, Jordan. Okay, anything else from anyone while we're all together here? Okay, and with that, just a couple of notes about our next series of meetings here. Our next meeting, Land Use Servicing, will be on Thursday, the 11th of April, 9 a.m. via this fabulous platform. Again, one more time. Our board meeting is the 26th of April, and Governance Committee is currently in your agenda packages scheduled for September, but I would say look out for another meeting here first week of May, probably the 3rd. For those of you here who are on Governance Committee, we need to review our annual report. So we're very likely to end up having probably a relatively brief Governance Committee meeting. Again, online on the 3rd of May is likely the day. So keep a close eye on your email inboxes for that invitation. And with that, unless there's anything else anyone wishes to raise, the agenda being exhausted, I declare the meeting terminated. Thank you all for your thoughtful contributions today. Be well, everyone.